I know what you're thinking. Really? The Top Gun sequel is the peak of cinema in 2022? Yeah, look, I'm just as surprised as you are that the film many considered widely unnecessary and too late is the film welcoming audiences back to the theater in droves. Not only is Top Gun Maverick the most profitable film to ever open Memorial Day weekend, but it's also the rare cinematic experience that's resonating with both casuals and cinephiles alike, and I still can't quite figure out why, for the life of me, this Top Gun sequel managed to, against insurmountable odds, not only surpass all possible expectations, but cement itself as one of the great movie sequels, on top of being far better and more mature than its predecessor. I think IndieWire chief film critic David Ehrlich put it best when he said, Top Gun Maverick is a much, much better movie than Top Gun. I'm not talking about the difference between Paddington 2 and Paddington 1. I'm talking about the difference between Paddington 2 and Morbius. I mean, the dude's f***ing right. While reverent and occasionally self-aware of the legacy of the original Top Gun Maverick is far from the misty-eyed, nostalgia-obsessed, oh my god, remember this from the original? Remember how great the original is? Legacy sequels we've gotten over the years. Movies are always evolving. They have been since the day it first conspired in the mind of a visionary to combine a set of photographs to create a moving sequence, and the innovations and advancements that the medium have made since are as plentiful as the number of films released. The names of the most important pioneers, the essential trailblazers, are rightly notorious through the decades, their names reverberating through cinema with just as much force as they had during the original seismic event that their films set off upon release. Lumiere, Crossland, Lang, Chaplin, Reed, Hitchcock, Cassavetes, Scorsese, Lucas, Spielberg, Soderbergh, Tarantino, Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, sure, we'll throw him in there, and, Barry Jenkins, because we all love Barry Jenkins. But who is the biggest name in that respect today? Who is pushing against the limits of filmmaking harder than anyone else? Who is constantly raising the bar, proving time and time again that anything can be done, and that cinema does not and never will have limits to begin with? I suppose there are several names, several auteurs active today, including some of the names I've already mentioned who you could place in that spot, but it's hard to not acknowledge that no one is doing it quite like
Tom Cruise!
I mean, we just saw a standalone film from the 80s, a defining action classic with no readily apparent future, receive an unlikely and, in some ways, unexpected sequel. We watched actors actually sit in the cockpits of F-18s while the jets pulled off death-defying maneuvers, redefining what an action set piece can be, and reprising his role from the original 80s film, corralling together every tool in his kit with an added dash of fearlessness and maybe even some sprinkles of sheer madness, is the name in action filmmaking who is shoving the envelope further than any of his other peers. That is, again, Tom Cruise. Top Gun Maverick is here, and you know what? You might as well call it Top Gun Miracle, because it's a miracle this film exists, and it's a miracle it's as good as it is. I really can't... It's a fucking Top Gun sequel, what? The original film is fun. I love it. I have a lot of fond memories of that, and it was one of the films I watched a lot growing up as a kid. But I also recognize that it's kind of a vibey film. It's a Tony Scott 80s action movie, and very much fits within the confines of what movies were doing at that time. It's really just a movie that captured the culture of the time period, and whose story is built from the tensions of the Cold War. It's been 35 years now since Top Gun was released. It was a film about young men who were the best of the best of the best at something incredibly dangerous and exceedingly specialized, learning that they had maturity and growth to experience. The Cold War has long since frozen entirely. Movies have changed, and those young men are now much, much older. How would a sequel even work? A reboot? Maybe there's something there, but a sequel? With Tom Cruise pushing 60 sitting in a cockpit once again? Obviously, the man has proven with his Mission Impossible movies that age is not an impediment, but does it make sense in this story for Maverick to not have been grounded years earlier? Well, yes. Besides the obvious, the ways in which Top Gun Maverick redefines action cinema with its staggering in-camera flying sequences, the thing that makes this movie vital is Tom Cruise. With genuine pathos pathos and consistent outward but subtle expression of grief, regret, uncertainty, both from Maverick reflecting on his past and gazing towards the future, this is one of the actor's all-time great performances, right there beside Collateral and Magnolia and Born on the 4th of July. It's all a profound reflection on aging, on the idea that one must fight constantly and with harder punches over time against the multitude of ways in which society, our careers, try more and more viciously to declare us irrelevant with each passing year. To say that we are incapable of so much by middle age, that we must let those younger kids take hold and step aside in order to make way for them. Top Gun Maverick roars with the engine of an F-18 against that idea, shows how false it is, and in the process serves as a monument to Tom Cruise himself, a mission statement, if you will accept it, on how important he has been to the history of filmmaking, how hard he continues to push the envelope, and how he is one of the most important trailblazers in the industry. Top Gun Maverick is the pinnacle of the ways in which Tom Cruise has spent more than 20 years redefining the blockbuster. Just like Maverick, Tom Cruise has the need for speed, but he also has the yearn to learn. Tom Cruise always seems to pick up something new for each role, to learn a new skill or expand his knowledge on one already familiar to him. What if we could apply that to our own creativity? Well, Skillshare is here to make it happen. Skillshare is an online community of learning that inspires its members to reach new heights in a creative way that is personal to them, through thousands of premium classes that can allow them to invest in their personal growth and creative endeavors. For example, do you want to start making video essays of your own? Well, it's easy enough to find Skillshare classes on setting up a studio, recording audio, and on video editing. Have you already used those lessons to make the greatest video essay of all time, but can't get past the pesky YouTube algorithm in order for it to soar across the front page in the desk of Tom Cruise? There are also classes on social media marketing and getting the most out of YouTube waiting for you. Tom's Frank's class on productivity for creatives really helped me enhance my own creative process behind making FilmSpeak's video essays. I've been doing YouTube for 6 years now. God, I feel like I'm aging out. Oh my God, what is happening? Thomas was still able to give me new ideas and knowledge to apply in this space. An equally beneficial experience is waiting for you. The first 1,000 people to click the link below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So what are you waiting for? Join Skillshare and start expanding your creativity today. And thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Joseph Kosinski eases us back into the world of Top Gun with a danger zone-driven takeoff montage set against the backdrop of a hazy golden hour sky, only to fade off into the distance like a memory. A reminder of where we've been and what lays ahead. This isn't another story of a bunch of hotshot pilots showboating themselves to the top. No, this is a very different, more mature narrative that zeroes in on an aging Maverick, both in name and occupation, confronted with a world that seems not to value him anymore. We aren't reintroduced to Maverick in the middle of a sortie. We instead meet back up with him restoring a classic plane, a P-51 Mustang, while he takes a moment to reflect on his past. The opening informs us that the movie is going to be just familiar enough without being redundant, and that it isn't afraid to make a heartfelt, meaningful look back, honoring the legacy of Top Gun and Tom Cruise whenever the jets aren't in the air. And that's an early point in favor of the sequel over the original. For as cool as Top Gun was, its story and characters are a bit, thin. I know people love to kid about how the real romance in the original is between Maverick and Iceman, not Maverick and Kelly McGillis, but the reality is that the only fully developed plot thread in the movie is Maverick's rivalry with Iceman, learning to be a team player and earning Iceman's respect and true camaraderie in the process. Goose, for as amazing as Anthony Edwards is in the role, is even undercooked in that film, serving more as a sacrificial lamb or sacrificial goose, bird, the turkey, yeah, never mind, whose death spurs Maverick into doing things the right way than as a fully formed character in his own right. Here, Goose's ghost has more presence and input into the story than the character had when he was alive. Despite Anthony Edwards' charismatic and worthy performance in the original, Goose's loss is felt deeper here than when he actually died. I almost wonder if those who are coming into this sequel without having seen the original might have an equally profound reaction to the flashbacks and elegiac nature of this story, if not more so. The hypersonic flight test that follows this opening is much more than just a re-establishment of how Maverick will always push things to the limit and get it done. It's the other half of what makes this story vital. Maverick is doing this test against the wishes of a hard-ass admiral who wants to ground him and use the money involved to fund his drone project. Maverick railing against the idea that you can't just entirely remove humans from the cockpit is a moderately familiar story beat. It was done with spies and espionage during the Craig-era Bond films, and it's part of the reason why I think this movie is like the Skyfall of Tom Cruise films, but the movie doesn't spend the next 2 hours dealing with it as its main conflict. Instead, it flows in the undercurrent of the story. You need someone like Maverick in the cockpit because while "if you think you're dead" is true for a fighter pilot, you need to have someone directly at the controls who is able to use their discretion, their intuition, their good instincts as a pilot, if necessary, make unorthodox decisions. The movie states this and then lets it reverberate throughout every decision Maverick makes afterwards without beating the audience over the head with it. What's more, this is a testament to the film itself. I doubt cinema could ever become automated, where you literally take the human element out of filmmaking, even though I think we are getting pretty close with some of the Disney Plus series, but I do think that filmmaking by numbers is a thing. A scenario where the same predictable, pedestrian, in-execution 3-act story becomes the cinematic standard isn't unfeasible. God, that's bleak. Someone like Tom Cruise, who is willing to constantly create a cinematic experience unlike anything we've seen before, is vital to cinema. He is the kind of person who makes cinema happen. I'm not saying he's the only one, or that he's infallible, or that you must think he's cinema's greatest visionary. No, not at all. I mean, look, Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, Paul Thomas Anderson, Greta Gerwig, the Safdie brothers, or countless others are filmmakers that are pushing the envelope, that are taking risks, that are doing things for cinema that are going to preserve its longevity. Tom Cruise just happens to be the world's biggest movie star, and so he can take that part of his persona and use it to get these incredible, jaw-dropping, death-defying projects financed and made. Because he's not simply just a director. He's an actor, he's a producer, he's involved in story, the editing process. He is involved in every single major facet of production, and without him, the movies would probably still be great. You got someone like Christopher McQuarrie and Joseph Kosinski, which, by the way, quick aside, Joseph Kosinski fucking rules. I'm glad the guy's finally getting credit for an incredible body of work that goes all the way back to Tron Legacy. Go watch Tron Legacy, go watch Oblivion, those movies are fucking masterpieces. Oh, and Only the Brave, that's great too. We could go on a whole tangent here about how Joseph Kosinski is this generation's James Cameron, but you know what? We're not going to do that. And I guess if I was to put a cap to all of this rambling, the point I'm making is movies need filmmakers who are unafraid to push the envelope just as much as fighter jets need pilots who can make the kind of judgment calls that an unmanned drone never will be able to. And this movie itself is not only proof of that, it's actively aware of it. If there was ever one character who's synonymous with Tom Cruise across his entire filmography, it's Maverick. So much of the actor's own confidence, ego, charisma, daredevil attitude, and yes, awkwardness with romance are woven into the very fabric of Pete Mitchell. Seriously, have you tried watching a Tom Cruise love scene? Oh my God, they are rough. It's almost inhuman. In the story, Maverick has had ample opportunities to advance his career. He should by all reasonable measures be at least an admiral. The idea of him holding public office is even floated, and yet he's still a captain manning his aircraft. "I'm where I belong," he says. Maverick doesn't want to leave the cockpit until he's physically incapable of sitting in it. People always ask why Cruise hasn't moved on to sit in the director's seat, why he's continued to make action movies instead of trying to make another Born on the 4th of July. He's done them before, and we know he has it in him, but it's apparent that for every Rain Man, Last Samurai, or Collateral, Tom Cruise would rather stay in the one place where he feels alive, where he's good at what he does, and where he can inspire future generations to take risks and make movies like him. Like his character in the film, Cruise is a literal maverick in the industry, pushing for the preservation of something sacred, something tangible, the need for an artist behind the camera or a real person in front of it, a damn good pilot in the cockpit flying an impossible mission. It's not the plane, it's the pilot. And while the mission films are breathtaking feats of practical filmmaking, they've never really been about the story. You don't go see something like Fallout, for as much of an action masterpiece as that film is, for this intricate globe-trotting tale of character and espionage. The films have just enough broad strokes to make you care about what's happening, but the emphasis is placed on what you really bought that $20+ ticket for: Tom Cruise performing death-defying stunts for real. When it comes to Top Gun Maverick, we're still going to see Tom Cruise perform aerial acrobatics in a fighter jet. This time, though, Joseph Kosinski, Christopher McQuarrie, and the rest of the writer's room decided to give meaning to the madness, to explore the questions: what drives someone like Tom Cruise to do what he does? What does it say about him, and why does it matter in an age where practicality and creativity in blockbuster entertainment is being diminished? Top Gun Maverick uses the same property that birthed Tom Cruise the movie star to explore his legacy now that he is all but the face of blockbuster cinema. And so when we reunite with Maverick, we reunite with a guy with regret, someone who has a complicated personal life. Maverick is living with the ghost of not only Goose, but of his entire past. His history with the military has turned him into a notorious black sheep, one whose talents are revered, but whose attitude and fearlessness, many would say recklessness, is condemned. Iceman, now an admiral, is Maverick's only lifeline. Other admirals and authority figures have fought tooth and nail to get Maverick grounded, but Iceman always finds another assignment for him, another reprieve, some way to keep his friend in the cockpit for as long as possible. Iceman doesn't just do this to help a buddy or show favoritism, he also does it because he knows Maverick is the best pilot there is, and the skies are better protected with him in them, or at the very least ensuring that the next generation of fighter pilots are directly touched with Maverick's knowledge, techniques, and ability. And with Goose having died, his wife having passed away in the interim between movies, and Kelly McGillis nowhere to be found, Iceman is the one rock-solid connection between the two films, and ultimately a large source of its heart. Top Gun Maverick is mostly heart. It's really genuine, it's sincere, it wears its 80s cheese on its sleeve, and it's what Joseph Kosinski does best. These cutting visuals, these jaw-dropping effects, and these boundary-pushing techniques are part of what makes him a James Cameron-like filmmaker. But again, back to Maverick, any one of the storylines in the film captures this. Miles Teller's Rooster both homages and honors Goose, making the character from the original film more impactful and more resonant, even though we pretty much never see him outside of a flashback and a couple of photographs. Maverick attempting to be the father that Rooster lost before he could really have one conveys a desperation, both to protect Rooster, but also to have a proper relationship with him in every scene the two share. And even the romance between Maverick and Penny Benjamin, a character that was only briefly mentioned in the original Top Gun that somehow manages to be incredible in this film. Their romance not only has 100 times the chemistry that the romance in the original film had, but feels much more fully formed despite having less screen time dedicated to it. And consequently, where the relationship between Maverick and Charlie feels entirely shoehorned into the original film, this romance is organic, sincere, and electric. You get that sense of history, that Maverick is constantly letting people down because of his own ambition, because he doesn't have the ability to trust people, and because he's not really allowing himself to let people in, for them to help him, for them to trust him. So you can kind of figure out why him and Charlie probably parted ways. But what's great about Maverick's relationship with Penny is you see a guy who is filled with regret for his past relationships, for his past mistakes. He's alone. He's got a lot on his mind. He's probably made more mistakes over the years than he has not made mistakes. And so this is him coming to terms with everything that he's done wrong, which includes leaving Penny Benjamin every single time that they came into contact with each other. But this time, something's different. Something's changed in him. He understands who he is and his place in the world, and how sometimes he needs that lifeline from other people. He needs that trust. that sometimes he doesn't have all of the answers, no matter how much he thinks he does. The collaborative process, both in the film and outside of the film, is emphasized here. And again, even Tom Cruise, someone who's had a lot of relationship controversies over the years, someone who doesn't necessarily have the strongest relationship with his kids anymore because of some of his past decisions. You can get all of this, all of that regret in the relationship Maverick has with Penny Benjamin, and how this is the way he wants it to be. He's going to make up for it. But remember, the real love story has always been between Maverick and Iceman. And that's where the beating heart of the film pounds the strongest. Val Kilmer's battle with cancer, which he's apparently managed to win, thankfully, in the years since the movie was filmed, is integrated into the story, which is one of the most tasteful uses of an actor who has transformed so significantly since the last time we saw them in this property. And they incorporate those changes into the character because it's a part of them. It doesn't try to gloss over it or recreate them out of CGI bullshit. It's real and it's respectful. Iceman only gets one scene in the movie, and it's heartbreaking because of the unavoidable real-life parallels, but it's also powerful. Maverick comes to Iceman not knowing what to do with Rooster and his assignment, and Iceman, who can barely speak and largely communicates through typing now, does not waste time or mince words. He's jovial towards his friend, but also blunt. Maverick isn't really struggling with Rooster, he's struggling with Goose. He's struggling with his past demons. You have to let go, Ice says. He has to let Rooster be his own man, sure, but the reality is that Maverick has been holding on to Goose since he was cradling his body in the water. He let go physically, but he hasn't let go. It's holding him back from giving his students what they need, from giving Rooster what he needs inside and outside of the cockpit, and from giving himself what he needs. Iceman drills this into Maverick's head and doesn't give him an inch to shy away from the lesson that he needs to learn, from the fact that even the world's best pilot doesn't know everything. This is an incredible scene, and you know what? If you don't have an emotional reaction to it, you might need to consult a cardiologist, but it is also the vital scene in the story, because when Iceman passes away a few days later, it cements in Maverick's mind what his friend told him. The only way forward is to stay the course, to double down on the thing he's good at, and rage against any effort the military takes to ground him, to make him irrelevant. Anything else, anything less, would just let himself and those who depend on him down. So Maverick takes the reins, gets in his F-18, and shows firsthand that the mission, this impossible mission he's been training the pilots for, can be flown. One of the most jaw-dropping sequences in the entire film. I had chills every single time. The editing, the cinematography, the music, you could just feel it all in the theater. And then the climax provides an increasing thrill ride as well as they pull off the mission without losing anyone, because that's exactly what Maverick prepared them for. Not to just fly the mission and possibly lose their lives as the military would like them to do, but to fly the mission, fly it safely, fly it accurately, fly it as planned, and come home. And one of my favorite parts is that the movie also subverts the martyr trope. Maverick sacrifices his plane to save Rooster, but not himself, because it's when he finally learns to let go and trust his wingman. Because while in the first film he may have learned the value of being a team player, he still has this sense of control that he can't quite let go of, which is why that scene where Rooster comes back and saves his life is just as powerful. He can't control what other people will do, and other people, because they love him and because they trust him, are going to do what they're going to do in order to save his life. And I think that's the biggest lesson from both of Iceman's speeches to him, the one from the original Top Gun and the final one he ever gave in Maverick. Whatever emotional turbulence Maverick may be going through, there's only one thing he can do that makes him feel alive, where he feels he has a purpose and is doing something right. He needs to be in the cockpit. But why resist the future? Why resist change and cling to the past? Well, because sometimes you need the past. Sometimes the value in the old ways overrides modernity. This is true of Maverick, and is true of Tom Cruise and filmmaking. Top Gun Maverick couldn't exist as is without advancements in technology, but it still harkens back to a more traditional style of blockbuster, with a lead actor using old-school movie magic to immerse audiences in the realism of the story. Like how Maverick finds his true potential in the cockpit, the big screen is where Tom Cruise earns the respect of his peers and audiences. The many Cruise controversies aside, when he performs a halo jump over Paris, or clings to the door of a cargo plane at 260 miles per hour, or free climbs the Burj Khalifa, or pilots the shit out of an F-18 fighter jet, you can't help but be in awe of the dedication to realism and the immense respect Cruise has for an audience. Sure, there have been massive advancements in filmmaking technology that would allow for sequences such as the ones I mentioned to be executed with far less risk. And yeah, they probably look mostly legit, but there's something to be said about an artist so dedicated to analog and the indescribable magic it possesses that he'll be inside a jet while a Navy pilot is controlling it, rather than use an elaborate green screen rig. Cruise talks ad nauseum about Buster Keaton being a massive inspiration for his love of cinema. He waxes poetic about the great lengths the filmmaker, actor, producer would go to entertain an audience. Not what he did, but how he did it. As Maverick in the film says, "It's not what I am, it's who I am. How can I teach that?" And that's the big hurdle for Maverick over the course of the film, leading by example. Just as Buster Keaton did, pioneering new ways of filmmaking and specifically physical comedy back in the day, and actually going on to inspire Tom Cruise himself. It's therefore fitting that Cruise should become the modern day embodiment of Buster Keaton. Both men thought up ingenious stunts that pushed the boundaries of physical comedy and action filmmaking respectively, taking calculated risks for some of the greatest entertainment that's ever been created. For as hard as the creatives that surround them may try, it's Keaton and Cruise that pitch the maddest ideas, the most ingenious ideas, the ideas that make you go, "That's impossible, it can't be done," only for them to stare you dead in the face and say, "It can be done." Tom Cruise isn't simply a good actor. He, like Buster Keaton, is a whirlwind of technical precision and flawless execution. As film critic David Thompson said of Keaton, a man inclined towards a belief in nothing but mathematics and absurdity, like a number that has always been searching for the right equation. And that's a description, I might add, that speaks to the very nature of Cruise as well. The visual experience you get from Top Gun Maverick, as a result, is something that is quite unparalleled on the big screen. Both Kosinski and McQuarrie deserve praise for not just letting the movie rest on its spectacle, but instead delivering a story that is full of heart. And the hundreds of effects crew that helped add every last visual touch to bring it all home should each be given Oscar statuettes, but Tom Cruise is the man who sat in the pilot's seat when needed, without whose absolute commitment, Top Gun Maverick would have been an impossibility. But because he didn't shy away when cinema needed him, Top Gun Maverick instead exists as a borderline miracle. So to answer the most important question, is Top Gun Maverick really the
Top Gun?
Well,
Yes, sir.